Good to see you again, Ed. The
Oh, the
last
pleasure is
time,
mine. Good to see you too.
the last time we met, it was 2013 in Las Vegas, in a one-day workshop you gave. I was there, and uh, this was our last meeting.
Oh, I remember because I called a girl to come to your room. Remember?
Yes, of course. How can I forget her? Yes, Ed. Good to see you.
Good to see
We have guests from Germany and from abroad this time, and this is the first interview in Germany we make without German translation, because the translation always extends the amount of time, and we want to have the time to talk. The interview today, our Zoom session, is some kind of a corporate activity between IRWA, CSI Germany, the IRWA activity, and my remote viewing training. I'm offering this remote viewing training for 25 years now, and you were my trainer. And we want to push forward the remote viewing stuff through all possible kinds of channels. And so we have set up in Germany a Telegram group and some Facebook groups to put together all these people interested and all these people trained in remote viewing in theory and theory, so that people don't feel that they are alone without any contacts to others. Maybe I can give a short overview about the evening. The first is the interview with Ed, and as a follow-up, we will make questions and answers to Ed. I think people here will have some questions to you, going more forward than the questions I will ask you. And the first is, Ed, what is your time limit? How about your time frame you want to invest?
Say again. Oh, I have to go on the road while I still have daylight because I'm. Can you see that?
Yes, a little bit higher. Your camera is a little bit high, so it's only part of your head.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So I have to recon her position. That's a cold case, Pearl Pinson. Pearl disappeared about 8 years ago. She's a murder victim, and the murderer deposited her body after he killed her. But the murderer was killed in a shootout the day afterwards. So nobody knows where he put her body. But that's where I come in cases like that. So I determine where her remains are. They're about 2 hour drive. My Jeep's ready to go. So about 90 minutes will give me a chance to get there and recon the area while I still have daylight.
Okay. So we have 90 minutes for the interview, correct?
Correct.
Okay, fine. So let's start with one
And
thing.
may I interrupt you one more time?
Yeah.
On the 13th of this month, I have a 4 hour Zoom event in my studio, which is not far from here. And I can go into your questions much more extensively during those 4 hours.
Yes, I will participate, of course. Yes.
At remoteviewingmatrix.com.
Okay. Normally, Jana Rogge would have taken part in this interview because we are cooperating all these interviews and the groups and so. But unfortunately, today she can't take part. And she had a question to you. We are not on the part of question and answers, but she had a question, and she told me I shall ask you, but I told her make a short video and invite yourself or present yourself so that you get an impression whom I'm working with.
Good evening. My name is Jana Rogge. I was really looking forward to this meeting tonight, but it turned out I cannot make it be live at this call. And I had a question that I would like to ask you, and so I told Gunther to ask my question, and Gunther said, why don't you take a recording and ask it yourself? So I'm here, and this is my question. Since you published the Learn How courses in the early 2000s, what I see is that a lot of people out there in the resources field refer to this version as the original pyramid. So they learn pyramid advanced courses, and they mean that they have learned on the version. So I would like to know from you where you see the difference between 1996 or 1997 version that you called Gunther and other people, of course, and later learn on the version of theory, and what your recommendation is in good faith if someone wants to get more interested here.
Okay, this
Yeah.
was a question. I think you will answer it within the interview, because Learner V will also be a part of the questions we have. Please, all people who have questions, put it into the chat so that we can go through the questions after the interview and no question is forgotten. And please switch off the microphone so that there are no switches in the focus for the camera. This would be a little bit disturbing. Okay, Ed, the first thing I think I would like to start is a short excursion to your education and to your military time, according to remote viewing, and your education in general.
You mean starting with the academics?
Yes.
I went to, I enlisted when I was 17, airborne infantry as a paratrooper. And after spending time as a paratrooper in 1974, I went to the University of California at Berkeley, and I majored in Chinese Mandarin, and my minor was biophysics. I went back into the Army commissioned officer in 1978, and ended up during the Cold War in Nuremberg, Germany, as the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment's first electronic warfare officer, and patrolled the border, those kinds of things. And then I entered the spook world. I was commissioned because I was selected to go to a special unit. I was in the generals that I worked for recognized that I was not only a nonlinear thinker, and not only someone who thought outside of the box, but I had no boxes. And that paid off in very complex spying operations where people would say, that's impossible. And I would say, what? Because that was a cue for me. I love the impossible, to do that. So I had some very exciting experiences against the Russians, predominantly using Germany as a jump-off point, those kind of things. All those are classified. And then I moved up to the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the highest level that you can go in intelligence in my country. So I had all these assets at my disposal. I became a spy master in biological warfare. I briefed the President of the United States directly. You can see my medals, including a Legion of Merit. You can read the unclassified parts of my service. But one of the assets I had at my disposal, I mean, I had spies on the ground, of course, agents in various countries, satellite, all the satellite stuff that I needed to do my job. But we still could not crack a couple of programs that the Russians had, the Soviets had at that time. One was biological warfare. The other was nuclear research. And there were a few exotic programs, particle beam weapons and things like that, that I was tasked with breaking open and spying on. And I didn't have the tools to do it. All the stuff at my disposal wasn't enough to gain a foothold into these very highly classified Russian programs. But I had one brand new tool, and that was remote viewers. They were at the beginning of the remote viewing program, about 1972. And then I started using them in about 1980, 81. Yeah, I started actually using them, and they were providing me with a foothold into these programs. They were giving me information that allowed me to cross-cue, to use their information, for instance, to redirect a satellite's look angle, to look in a different place, those kinds of things. My agents on the ground, using the remote viewers techniques and methods, including Joe McMonagle, using his data to redirect my agents on the ground in Moscow and many other Russian cities too. And I was so happy with that. It was giving me the insight that I needed to do my job, to answer the mail, that kind of thing. And I became so enthralled with the unit, I stepped down from these celestial levels of intelligence to take over, after Ingo Swan trained me, to take over as operations and training officer, and the story goes on.
Mm-hmm. And you...
And in order to jump ahead, in terms of really the meat of what we're here for, is Ingo's method was an experiment. Don't forget, it was an experiment. His funds, SRI, he and Hal Putoff, they were $50,000, and the money was running out. So Ingo was pretty tense about that. He had to come up with a structure to be able to make this work, to be able to collect information using remote viewing that could be used to support the intelligence community. And he did it. But that structure, now I was tasked with taking that structure into the deep, dark world of intelligence. Ingo didn't have clearances. He only had a secret clearance, but I had every clearance, every one. They're very sensitive things. My job was to take Ingo's discovery, which should get the Nobel Prize, really, his initial discovery, and massage it into an effective information collection tool that we could continue to use to support intelligence. Well, it had a lot of problems operationally. It had a lot of problems. I mean, folks at IRVA, they're 30 years behind the power curve. They have no idea. You have a little bit as a technical remote viewing teacher, but they have no idea the kinds of things we've done with this after I worked out all the bugs. But they had serious bugs, and we need to talk about those bugs, including how I solve in associative remote viewing, particularly binary associative remote viewing, what's going wrong. Why? Russell Targ asked me, how did you solve the displacement problem, psi missing? How did you solve it? And I'll tell you what happened after that, what I told him and his reaction. But we had to work out a lot of bugs. The search problem, Ingo didn't know if the search problem, that's what he called it, could ever be solved. Well, it's solved now, but it took me 20 years, over and over again, 20 years to solve the search problem. The little girl, the murdered girl that I'm looking for this afternoon, there's no way. She's in a homogeneous environment. Bushes, shrubs by a lake, too. So I'm able to get that location down, even in a homogeneous environment, open ocean, lakes, or things like that, down to about 200 feet, in the ocean about 600 feet, which is enough for corporate contracts that I've done to do that. But again, the IRVA is 30 years behind the power curve, and I need to bootstrap you guys, because the IRVA is important. It's getting the message out to people worldwide that, hey, take a look at this. It's one of the human potentials that we didn't know about, but it's real. the same as other things that yogis do, and in terms of human potential, we're a whole lot more than we think that we are, as people have said before. But John Hathcock started the IRVA. He funded the first meeting. First meeting, there's pictures of that. Stephen Schwartz was walking around the table. He said, "Hey, let's do a remote viewing session." David Hathcock wanted me to train him. I set up a slot in my Beverly Hills office, and he calls me about a week before and says, "I have to have open heart surgery. I can't make it. Can my son come?" I said, "No, your son didn't ask for training. Your son may not have any interest in it whatsoever. You asked for training. Your slot, when you heal from your surgery, your slot's still there, David." So David healed, came for training, and he was astounded. Yeah, David was the IBM's talking dog, the chief talking dog. And then he started his own IT company. It became successful too. And he came into my training and he realized how powerful this technique is, what kind of potential that it had in so many areas. And that's why he started the IRBA. But he didn't like the way I was marketing remote viewing on radio shows, Coast to Coast AM and things like that, because I was talking a lot about UFOs and ETs and things like that, it's the problem of the century, but he wanted to take it down to the grassroots level. So all the people that started IRVA, David was there and funded it, began to fund it. It was funny because Stephen Schwartz said, "Hey, at that initial meeting, let's do some remote viewing." So his classical pencil in the shoebox type of thing, where he takes a box, puts something in the box. "Okay, let's everybody at the table, all the original members at the table, let's remote view this." So about 10 minutes later, he opens the box, takes out something, I forgot what it was. And he walks around to look at all these people's work, Len Buchanan, Paul Smith, and all the people that you know. And he gets to David Hathcock, and he said, "Wow," this is Stephen Schwartz. "Wow, David, that is really good." And David says, "Ed Dames taught me that." And no, everybody was silent too, because I'm the persona non grata in those environs. But anyway, RVA it has a real purpose, but it's extending itself now, but it's still in the training mode. Using coordinate remote viewing, I had to change that because of other problems that we can talk about if you want. Yeah, catch up with 30 years, we can't do that. But RVA has its place, and for training, so people can become aware of what their minds can do. Most people in the world have never heard of remote viewing, so RVA can help that. I was invited to speak there many years ago, and that's where I asked people, about 200 people in the audience, "How many of you use remote viewing to make a living, like you do?" Not a single hand went up, not even Russell Tarr. Nobody used it to make a living, except the master, the MC, Paul Smith, who was on stage with me. And I told them that I created the IRVA song, the theme song.
Yes.
Most of you know that, but I created that theme song strictly for that meeting too. But they didn't even allow me to finish at that when I was president there. Probably some of these guys haven't heard it. But why are you laughing, Gunther?
Because I know this song. This is the first point, and the second point is because I firmly believe in the fact that remote viewing people should be open-minded and open to different perspectives.
It's very interesting you say that, because I was the guest at several UFO conferences in Germany after the Cold War, of course, and really enjoyed that. But the people in Germany, of course, they were interested in remote viewing and not just UFOs, but remote viewing in itself. And they would come to me and ask me technical questions. And, Major Dames, if we do this, can we do this too? Blah, 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 technical stuff. Whereas in America, If I go to a conference and there's a break, then those Americans come, oh, Major James, it's so wonderful to meet you. No questions, no technical questions whatsoever. So very different cultures too. But I'll just give you a couple of stanzas of the song for people who haven't heard it before. I got to get my singing voice ready. See if I can do this. My mother's a whore in Chicago. My father's a pimp in LA. My sister goes down for a quarter, and I'm in the IRVA. IRVA, to join one needs simply to pay, IRVA, send in your money today. At that point, they pulled me off the stage. And I couldn't go back on stage until I promised not to sing the rest of the song.
So.
But what's important to me, for you guys, for me to help bootstrap you, is number one, I don't have to go into the background of why coordinate remote viewing can't solve problems. It's great for when you do need to penetrate a top secret laboratory or something else like that. You know what the Cartesian coordinates of that target are, so it's fine too. And that was converted to Lynn Buchanan wanted to take coordinate. I had to change a lot of the protocols, and Lynn Buchanan came up with this idea. He was never trained by Ingo. I had to train Lynn. And Lynn kept screwing around with the protocols. Lynn, I can't train you if you keep screwing around with the protocols. Something, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But he did that, and he turned this idea into controlled remote viewing. He went to Ingo and said, hey, I changed a few things. Is this okay? And that became controlled remote viewing. Well, controlled remote viewing has some serious flaws, not against training targets. That's fine. A mountain, the Eiffel Tower, or something else like that. And that's great for new people, new trainees to see what their minds can accomplish in the training. But it absolutely fails in operations at total. There's three parts to remote viewing: setting up the problem, queuing, the session itself, right, where you're not allowed to think, and analysis. Well, queuing, Tom McNear should have become Ingo's protege, not me. Tom was excellent at work. I mean, Ingo said, Tom, you're better than I in terms of this work, this so-called remote viewing work, too. But Tom stopped viewing after he left the surface. He just stopped. In fact, he stopped viewing when he went back into counterintelligence, too. But Tom was amazing. And his stage 6 work, Tom was introduced to stage 7. Ingo Swann thought that there were verbals embedded on the signal line, the proverbial signal line, that you could extract verbals. So he experimented with stage 7 verbals, and McNear mastered that. It's very difficult techniques. For instance, Tom, in a training target, used stage 6 to take modeling compound. Use modeling compound for that kind of stage. Don't use Play-Doh and don't use clay. For that clay, if it's cold, it takes forever to warm it up, and women hate it because it gets under their fingernails, and they just hate that. But modeling compound is great. Extracts moisture from the air, doesn't get hard unless you bake it. But Tom did bake this. He had a model of a dam, and he had already done all the remote viewing work. Water here beside this structure, water here, this curved, big curved thing. So we know it's a dam, right? But they didn't know how to find things like I do today, like little dead girls. And but he used stage 7 very effectively too, quite amazing. So you have the architecture, the geometry of your throat and your lips and your larynx and your tongue is important in stage 7. So Tom, using stage 7 to name the dam, to name that dam anywhere in the world, he starts off with, you concatenate the sounds, could be any language. It's the sounds, not the phonemes, not the glottals, not the stops, just the sounds. So he starts, us, he writes that down, AS or whatever he does, to one, uno, wa. No, you can see how difficult it is. None. Starts again. One. Make a long story short. Aswan. Dam. And I've seen him do this against an institute of higher learning. Pull out the whole name. So he remote views just a remote viewing training target, and it ends up being an institute of higher learning. He uses stage 7 to name it because there's a zillion institutes of higher learning. Right? Oral Roberts University. He pulled the whole thing out using stage 7. So there were stages that Ingo was investigating. Stage 8, of course, is alphanumerics and things like that. It can be done using associative binary remote viewing, but I have to teach you guys how to do it. Now, I've taught. If you want to be a professional, you have to master the fundamentals of technical remote viewing. That's on my website. It's video streaming. You can take it anywhere you want and learn it. Don't rush ahead. Whatever you do, that's self-defeating. And then the clinics, the 5 clinics that I conducted, you've been to a couple, I think, Gunther. Those clinics show you the industrial strength, not just potential, but the use of technical remote viewing against industrial strength projects, like the ones that I did early in the game for Lawrence Rockefeller, atmospheric ozone depletion, projected consequences, and remedial technologies. Let's see, for the Crown Prince of Liechtenstein, Hans Adam von Liechtenstein, who's one of his sons just died 2 months ago. Advanced deep space propulsion systems with a proviso. Remember, this is a contract. I'm paying my viewers $150 a session, and this is going to take at least 20 sessions for an initial report. When I go into in some future time, when I teach you guys how to do contracts, industrial strength contracts, you'll have to do contract work, and don't build into the contract a deliverable, because the deliverable in this case, okay, not only advanced deep space propulsion systems, but they have to be able to get a human being to Alpha Centauri and back in 1 human lifetime. So we fulfilled most of the tasks, the contract tasks, but the agent that Hans Adam had, the engineer, kept saying, I need to know more about this. I need to know more about, well, by week 3, I was in the red. I was still paying my viewers $150 a session, but I was in the red now, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 because I had to learn how this works. So I switched in my industrial contracts, Ford Motor Corporation, hydrogen-based automobile power plants, Bechtel Corporation. They wanted to build a base on the moon, and I had to come up with not just the geometries of the base, but what all the things were and how it was designed. I started using, instead of a deliverable, like building houses or something like that. You can see the finished house. I used research units. And those of you who are thinking about becoming professionals and putting together your own enterprise company, use research units. Use something like 2 remote viewing sessions plus analysis and charge for that, maybe $500 or something like that. If you're going to do research units for GeneX, for instance, approached me, they wanted me to come up with a vaccine for HIV. AIDS is the epidemiological fact. The HIV is the actual virus too. And minimally $50,000. I could start with 30 for an overview, but to complete that project, in terms of research units, I anticipated at least 150 research units, plus an initial report, final report. Those get built into the contract as well. The RVA, there's no discipline there. Discipline is very important as a teacher too. When you first learn is somebody that's off the streets and they have their first sessions, or maybe they're into the week and they're still not picking it up, which is common. And you can say, oh, sweetheart, that's okay. You fucked it up pretty badly, but you'll do better now. Oh, and look, you got red and great. Oh, and high and tall. Wow. Okay. Nah, I don't do that. Honey, you'll do better. No. The better, more in modern learning theory, feedback should be immediate and aesthetic. If you break your leg in a pole vault or a high jump, if you break your leg, that's aesthetic pain, and which I'll talk about momentarily, and it's immediate too. In our work, we have, when you remove the colored photo from the envelope and after a session is over, a beginner session, and you show the beginner this, then that's immediate. And the color photos used in training, that's aesthetic enough to meet those two criteria for modern learning theory. So a better thing than, oh, sweetheart, you'll do better, is humiliation. I mean, a tree died for this, right? And do that in a workshop too. So you single out a person. Now everybody's really worried too. But there's even a better way. And it's the fastest way to bootstrap a new remote viewer. And it really works. It's like, you made the same mistake again. I told you, how many times have I told you, don't do that? An intangible idea does not belong in a tangible section, things like that. If you make that mistake again, I'll tell you what, I'm going to cut you. I am going to cut you. Don't let that happen again. Do you understand me? Yes. Yes, what? Yes, sir. Good. Let's begin. So just kidding, maybe. But that's the kind of thing that Gunther almost had to go through when he trained with me, this kind of stuff. And Ingo Swan, train with Ingo, if you got something wrong, and of course you did, that's the learning experience, he would just glare. He wouldn't say a word, just glare at you. Because his reputation was, based upon your performance. And Ingo, you think training with me is hard? Ingo Swan, I didn't care, in stage 2, I didn't care about textures. Who the hell cares about texture? How many textures did I know? Hard, soft, hard's not really a texture. I don't know what. Ingo said, okay. So lunchtime in mid-Manhattan, our training was in New York and California. Midtown Manhattan. He walked me out on the streets. Everybody's eating lunch, things like that, all kinds of people on the street. He would point to something, like a glass window, people eating lunch inside. I had to touch the glass and within 4 seconds, come up with a texture. Okay? Then he points to dried dog shit in the gutter. I had to do it. I had to touch the dried dog shit and immediately say, okay, crumbly, soft, blah, blah, blah. He walked me all around mid-Manhattan doing it. So embarrassing at lunchtime. And then I had to come back and write an essay and use 100 different textures in the essay. So this is the kind of thing they did. This is discipline. And what I mean by discipline is, I don't know Pam Coronado. I know she's a member of you guys and things, but I don't know her. But she did, I guess she called it remote viewing. She did a session against a missing child in Australia. Big case, famous case. And she's on the record for this. You can read what she says. I smell hamburgers and children laughing and music, and they're playing. This is the missing kid, right? Where this kid is? Well, it's like an airline pilot landing 20 meters off the strip and telling his boss, well, look, I was only 20 meters off the runway, right? That's very analogous to Pam's work, if you call it work, too. Because the kid was very close to that site. The child was in a shallow grave across the highway, directly across the street, in private property in a shallow grave. So, that's close, but no banana. That's what I mean by discipline. If you fuck up like that, if you, Gunther, or your colleagues, you're fired. I'm not using it anymore. That's a huge mistake. And we cannot allow ourselves to make those kind of. I sent, ladies and gentlemen, Gunther, and I'll shut up in a second. I sent Gunther 2 cases that I did this month. One, they're relatively cold cases. One was a French case, Emile Solil. This was is a very famous French case here, and the authorities, the gendarmerie, they could not find this child, and it's still missing. So I picked it up. That's when I step in, when the authorities give up, and they gave up on him. So I sent my actual report, sensitive report, to Gunther so he could see what I'm doing. I like to stay connected with him, especially since he's a teacher. And then the other one, I'm pretty sure you Germans will recognize. I sent that report to Gunther as well. Inga Gericke went missing. And how many of you Germans, this is a famous case in Germany, still unsolved, I just saw it. How many of you folks, you German remote viewers, remote viewed Inga Gericke's case? Anybody? It doesn't matter whether you did or not, because you do not have the tools to find her. You do not have the tools for any operation, especially based on your queuing technique. Oh, describe Joan as she goes up the steps on August 21st, and just before she's killed, and then that kind of thing. That's the slappiest kind of cue there is. You don't understand the matrix. You don't understand your own mind. Ingo came up with remote viewing because he studied his own cognitive behavior, and the other great psychics did not. Oh, see what I did? They didn't understand how they did it. And Ingo dissected his cognitive behavior when he was on target. Sometimes he was off, to develop his structure, those kinds of things. And you guys are so far behind the power curve. Again, if you have any intention of working operations or doing corporate contracts, like I've done before, I stopped doing corporate contracts because the work is proprietary and I cannot talk about it anywhere. I can't talk about the result. That's understandable. But I wanted people to know how powerful this tool was, so I stopped doing corporate contracts and picked up my own showpiece. If you go over to the Remote Viewing Matrix site, you can see some of my showpiece projects. They're pretty neat. And then more sensitive ones are in the forums there, which I update. Okay, that's a mouthful. And you have any questions? Did I cover anything that you wanted to know? Go through.
I think you mentioned, for example, Geofix as the location tool. You gave it a name, a label, so that people can recognize it.
Geofix.
Yes, and what I would like to know from you is why, to your opinion, why do humans have this innate ability of intuition?
Well, I think it's just an extension of survival. For instance, we know we have to deal in technical remote viewing with unconscious, subconscious, and subliminals. That's why when you work a session, you don't want an open window in front of you and things like that, because subliminally and minimally, you'll pick up motion. Motion, when we crawled out of some primordial sea, when the seventh day, when God created the seventh day, when we crawled out of this primordial sea, motion is either, and was either, something that we could eat or something that planned on eating us. So motion is primal, those kind of things. And as we know, as TRVers, novelty acts as a stimulus. And because of that, I could get into much greater detail. For instance, I want to talk, because it's important, about why CRV fails in operations, and some of the things I had to find out for myself first, because we weren't solving a lot of the problems that we should have been solving as a military psychic spying unit. And this is why. One thing is using CRV against operations is the decoding of the ideogram. Ideograms are important. I've run through this with scientists many times. Are you still using the squiggle? Yes, we're still using. I wish we didn't have to. Actually, I don't have to, but new and even intermediate viewers do. They do it. it's very important to gain a foothold on the target that and then switch to stage 2s, which are scaffold. As you know, in professional, in operation, you throw away the stage 2s. They're just scaffolding. Stage 4 is where we start solving the problem. But in order to get that close contact, you have to go to stage 1, 2, and 3. But the thing that really was destroying our military sessions was decoding the ideogram into its A and B components, motion, feeling, and the B. Declaring a B was the worst thing. That's for beginning students with beginning targets, the Eiffel Tower, those kind of, a mountain, Mount Etna or whatever, beginning targets. Then, is this man-made or blah, blah, blah. Certain things are combinations, as we know. Man-made is half of a target, and natural is another. In some cases, some sculptures like that. So it destroys an operation where you're forced to declare something before you even connect with it. And there, it assumes that by decoding the feeling motion, the A component, that you have enough contact with the target that you can declare some form of its reality, and that's not true. That destroyed sessions, number one. Remember that, folks. I'll go over it again later some other time. And the other thing was after that, which was terrible, the worst thing I ran into was stage 4, homesteading stage 4. People like Paul, who I see is in there, superb remote viewers. They're operators, all right? So I'm watching them do great work as usual, but if you stay in stage 4, a point is reached where Katie barred the door, AOL's coming in, you can't stop it. So what I did in technical remote viewing, one of the things, is to truncate stage 4s, and then come up with a way of error trapping. Those two things result in very, very accurate information against all the archetypes that are in stage 3. Ingo didn't know that the answer to a problem is always present archetypically in the stage 3 sketch. And when I realized that, I said, all right, let's break apart, let's explore each archetype. When we do that, it's essentially a mini remote viewing session. It's a restart, which keeps you're looking now at only one part of the site, and focusing on that, essentially using a full-blown remote viewing session on each archetype. So if you screw up, let's say you're dealing with 3 key site archetypes, key site archetype. If you're dealing with 4 and you screw one up throughout a 1-hour session or 1.5-hour session, you still have, in terms of pattern analysis, when you subject the data, the site template or idea template to analysis, you still have 75% of correct data. Think of analogously, think of a jigsaw puzzle where you don't know what it is. The box shows the whatever. And at 75%, you may suddenly have and will the revelation, oh, it's a windmill. And then you can choose to put in all the framework and things like that if you want. But now you know the answer to the problem. Yeah, even though 25% of the puzzle is missing. So this is just one of the reasons why I had to develop technical remote viewing to solve problems. That you can later, you can show the viewers, I think, use your own discretion. You can show the viewers the information I sent to the French and German authorities on those 2 children. Okay, I'm not going to comment on that. But use your own judgment, because I'm sure your colleagues would want to see the kinds of reports that I've been sending out the last 30 years or so on public service work. I don't charge. Children are innocent, totally innocent. They have no choice in things too. So that's one of my key targets. The other, I don't talk about my gold projects. I have a shitload of gold, just natural gold. From mines, lost mines, I find the lost mines The gold's there. Do it. And in the future, I'll fund all my own operations. My son, one of my sons is going down to visit Kim.com in New Zealand next month. And Kim's a good friend with Elon Musk. And I have a project that I'm working, bacterial rhodopsin pools that can produce both electricity and chemicals. And we're going to have to take something like that into space with us. And it's a good, Mars is a good spot to use bacterial rhodopsin pools there. Oxford University is doing stunning work on bacterial rhodopsin, and I can help bootstrap. My other son is the world's leading plasma chemist, and sometimes I can, if he, as a plasma chemist, the world's leading plasma chemist, can articulate for me, a layperson, what the problem is. Let's say one of his reactors broke. He's the head scientist at a very large company that's going to become the next BASF. I'm not kidding. It's that big. And if he can explain to me what the problem is in layman's terms, now I can construct the proper cues, the attack cues, to get into that and give him the feedback that he may need to see either what's wrong or how to improve a product line. And we've done this so many times with Jet Propulsion Laboratory when they have problems, things like that. I train a cadre. So the problem with training a cadre, for instance, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they had a problem. They sent me 2 of their engineers, but the engineers, after learning remote viewing, after a week or 10 days, they didn't want to go back to work because RV is so fascinating. Who wants to go back to a drudge work, figuring out rocket fuel nozzles and jets and things like that. But anyway, that was a huge problem, stage 4, homesteading that. It starts out with perfect stuff, really great, especially when you have a really great remote viewer, Mel Riley, Paul Smith, Tom McNear, these kind of people. But even they would start losing the proverbial signal line if they stayed in stage 4 and kept on going. A point's reached where you have to use, I took the idea of stage 4.5 to Ingo, and I said, look, we're running into problems here. Dissecting, cutting a sentence up where we needed that. I got to get this out in one burst. It's as if, blah, 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 blah. Okay, now move on back into structure. Don't use stage 4.5 with newbies, whatever you do. Any specific questions?
Do you remember that in our training, I took a copyright for the 2/3 line in the stage 4 page? You told me to leave the page at 2/3 of the page, and I told you make a horizontal line at 2/3 and nobody will forget.
Yeah, that's what we do. My students were very helpful in me developing very complex tools. I have 2 students right now that are developing extremely complex, working on an extremely complex project involving 3 different AI chatbots, and extremely complex. One of my challenges to myself is to break quantum cryptography. I believe in my heart of hearts that I can break quantum cryptography. Now, as long as there's a single message, I can break it. But if you're dealing with a satellite, let's say you've got a submarine that's communicating with lasers to a satellite, but the laser may have any number of different channels on it. And if you try to extract the information from those channels, it's a mess. It really can't be done. If there were only a single channel communicating information on attack positions or potential this or that, that would be fine. You can extract information there because the idea pattern exists in the universe. You're tapping into the idea pattern of a book or something like that. What's this about? We can extract the information, but quantum cryptography is supposed to be unbreakable. But I submit to you, if the sender says you can't discern what the message is here, well, the sender had an idea in their mind, which they implemented in terms of machinery and sent it somewhere, right? So I'm just going in to the sender's, the creator's mind, and looking at their idea, and breaking it at that level. So that in my work over the years of so many different, never say you have 30 years of experience when all you have is 30 years, 1 year repeated 30 times. That isn't the case with my group. No, we take a look at our clinics. We hit every medical, all the industrial applications, all the science applications. We can get down to the molecular level. Paul Smith did a great session once. It was really neat. We were looking at, we were involved in the counter-narcotic. We worked for the DEA, looking at a counter-narcotics site. And I've sent agents down. In fact, I had 10 different names, cover names, when I was a spy master too. And my cover in South America was a bird watcher, because I am a dyed-in-the-wool bird watcher too. So that was my cover, and I was backstopped. If people wanted to find out how Enoch Nathan, one of my cover names, perhaps, background, there was created for me at another level of the Army, created for me a whole background and a backstop where they could call a number, my laboratory, and somebody would answer. When I left the Army, I did not have that. There's no way I'm going after the Kali cartel, when I don't have a backstop. But anyway, I needed Paul working the target blind. He was onto a chemical. He was onto a chemical, and I needed to know. It looked like benzene because of the bond angles and things like that. But what he was drawing in the end in analysis, when I went back and looked at it, was benzol. So the carbon groups, the bond angles, the carbon groups, were different. They had the same atoms, but the bond angles were different. So Paul wasn't, I don't think, was familiar with the Bohr model of the atom that many of us used my age, not yours, in high school. But the matrix, the universal mind, certainly was familiar with everything throughout time. So Paul was drawing upon that unconsciously. When I asked him to sketch a molecule of what was in this 55-gallon drum, and he sketched it, and it wasn't benzene because of the bond angles that we use with these little sticks and circles, that kind of thing. It was benzol. So we can get down at the molecular level, but when we get down to the atomic level, I was asked to describe sprites before they were understood, vertical lightning in the stratosphere, and wow, I couldn't do it. I failed to do that. Yeah.
You mentioned the word prototype in connection to Ingo Swann and others. And in the meantime, many people have tried out different protocol approaches. And to my opinion, it's not the problem to make a change, to test it out, and to tell, okay, I have changed something. As long as you mention that it's a prototyping and that it's not tested and not tested by others. And I think this is the problem in the remote viewing scene, that people are changing the protocols without the substance to test it and to bring it to perfection.
Exactly what Len Buchanan did when I told him not to do it. So I had to stop training him. He just wouldn't listen to instructions too. But that's exactly what he was doing. The untested protocols that he was changing against training targets, nevertheless. But if it's not broken, don't fix it. I know, for instance, in associative remote viewing, that I have a shortcut version of that. I don't use photographs in the envelopes. Russell Targ says, how do you solve the displacement problem? in binary associated remote viewing. I look at the photo, I open the envelope, look at the photo, 200 people, oh, he looks at the photo, oh, that kind of, they're not studying what the mind is doing. When you task your higher mind, your superconscious, at the unconscious level, going through a theta state, to look at both these sites. You're not remote viewing the photo. You're remote viewing its target reference material. You're remote viewing the target to which the photo is referencing to. If you remote view the photos, what do you get in stage twos? In technical remote viewing, we use textures first. There's a good reason for that. I won't get into that now. Perhaps on the 13th of January, textures. What's the texture of the photo? Let's say you printed it out to cottony, filmy, or something like that. Okay, what's the colors? Whatever the colors of the photos are, both colors, because your unconscious are looking at both targets, right? Because the end game is to discern which one of these photos and target reference sites is related to the answer that I need. So colors are both photos too. Smells, nothing. A taste, yuck. AI break, yuck. Pen down, pen back up. Taste, cottony, yucky. Yucky. AI break, yucky. Pen down. Don't try to work through AIs. Inga was particularly notable of this. Especially don't try to work through these AIs that you're holding back on. That gets into really some technically very interesting stuff. Okay, so, smell, taste, temperatures, room temperature, ambient temperature, sounds, no sound. Picture that printout doesn't have any sounds. Dimensions, flat, low, extensive. Remember, 80%. Stage two are even for pro is about 80% correct. So you're going to have 20% running error that we correct in stage fours, and we take the error rate back up to 10% rather than keep the 20. Flat, rectangular, low again. It's being emphasized by your mind. This thing's really low, and then flat. So you're going to get that if you're remote viewing pictures for both pictures. If you make sure that you're recognizing those photos as target reference material, then you'll do the right thing, but you still get it wrong. You'll still get it wrong, and I'll tell you why. And people, they don't recognize what's going on in their minds, not to mention the metaphysical aspects too, which are a whole different alligator. Ingo Swann did not concentrate because he didn't think it was important on the metaphysical aspects of what he discovered too, but they're very real when it comes down to sports betting and things like that. I won't go into that now, but if you keep the targets blind to you, and you work all the way through to the first, in our work, there's multiple stage fours. You need a stage four for each one of the archetypes that are present in the freehand sketch. So, but the first one is all you need for ARV, because that's enough information to be able to effectively discern one photo from another. Essentially, one site from another. But here's the clincher. You ask your unconscious to look at both sites. So it did. It went to both sites. So now when you open the envelopes, right, you're looking at both photos, and unconscious had to choose which one to give you because it went to both. So it just says, oh, take this one here. But what I do is I go through one iteration, and I don't use photos. I have a shortcut, and your mind cannot wander. It cannot wander for even 2 seconds when you work these things. And they're mind-numbing because iteration after iteration after iteration, your mind has to be absolutely on. It can't wander when you're conducting ERV. I don't use photos. I use, instead of your associated photos, I use associated motions. This is a hybrid, stage 1 and stage 3. That's all I use. See how these cards? Instead of 1,000 different photos that are geometrically and thematically different. Well, those are thematic, those are different. A straight line with the arrow, that's stage 3, straight line is the ideogram, and a circular motion with the arrow, those are quite different in terms of stage 1s and 3s, associated motions. That's all I use. There.
Can you show the circle again?
Because 30 years. What?
Can you show the circle again? We saw the line, but we didn't see the whole circle because it was out of the camera. Yes. Okay.
It's not a circle. It's a circular motion too. So this is a hybrid form. You've got that circular, that fast ideogram, that circular motion, and an arrowhead to indicate direction. So that's stage 3 there. So that's a hybrid there. And you've seen in my clinics how we use it. Your colleagues here haven't, but I've actually demonstrated this in the clinics and how this is used for sports betting and things like that. But I use it to speed up. John Gray, I may do a TV show. I haven't decided. I'm getting too old. I need a vacation, but I may do a television show. John Walsh came up with the conclusion that it takes 4 hours from the time a monster picks up a child, rapes the child, and they always use a vehicle, almost always, 99% vehicle. Vehicle is the spider's web. Use a vehicle, and 4 hours until that the abduction, the rape, the murder, and the disposal. And I said, Jesus, how am I going to be able to get location down in 4 hours? I mean, it's bad enough, hard enough, to get location. Well, that was 20 years ago. I said, I've got to get this down in 4 hours. Those things. When in the case of the girl I'm going after this afternoon, there's no rush. She's dead. It's her remains, whether pulled apart by vermin and animals in the rain. There's a ton of poison oak there too that I have to wade through. The oil in the spring is the worst because it gets in your Levi's. The oil soaks through your pants. Poison ivy. It's a North American species that is not pleasant at all. It causes contact dermatitis like you would not believe, but you got to do it to solve the problem. The mission bring closure to that. So that's a little bit of information about technical remote viewing, but it had to be developed in order to solve problems, and especially to solve the kind of problems that are in the clinics. All those kinds of things, how to really develop antidotes, but the cueing must be correct. HIV, for instance, you want to solve the AIDS problem. Well, AIDS started, based upon our work, started in a nightclub in Puerto Rico, or Haiti, AIDS as an epidemic. And I used to have to talk about epidemics to presidents of the United States. Started in Haiti. The HIV virus is what you wanted to attack in terms of prophylaxis or treatment, right? But you have to understand the virus first. The virus started not in Haiti at a dance hall. What the professional remote viewers come up with in terms of a site template and follow-on stage 6s is a man sleeping with a dog in a cave in Africa. Long story short, the HIV virus evolved from a canine virus, jumped ship into the simian community, and then into Homo sapiens community. So looking at the origin was very, very interesting because we determined, and I talked to molecular biologists at GeneX and genetics about that. The HIV virus has a flaw. It's like this Star Wars ship that had a Achilles heel, something like that. But there's an Achilles heel HIV virus. You can use present day canine vaccines to destroy it. And think how that's just one little aspect of the power of remote viewing when effectively done by experienced people like my pros. And there's so many other examples. I chose, in the end for myself, I chose missing children. And gold, of course, so I can buy anything I need to buy. I could do that as a spy. As a spy master, I could buy an airplane. The case I ran in Helsinki, the Russians had a secret lab there, and that was only $10,000. And we screwed up on one example, a funny example too. My agent, when we prepared all this, he had to look over a wall, so he had a pole with a camera on the end. So they're getting close, half a block away from where I needed him to stick this pole up, take a picture through glass doors of this secret Soviet laboratory in Helsinki. So he pulled out of the bag, he pulls this camera, and the people on the sidewalk stop and look at the camera. And he was shell-shocked, more than flummoxed. And they walk up and said, wow, because it was a Minolta at the time. Minolta, I had a Minolta too, a Japanese camera, impossible to get in Finland, in the entire country. Wow, can I see that? That kind of stuff. They wouldn't leave him alone. So he wasn't able to get the photo I needed. So I wasted $10,000. I thought of everything, but no, that was unanticipated. And then again on that subject. Wow.
Ed, what do you think is consciousness?
I don't know. It's the grand question, of course, in all areas. Time is another one too. It was only 10 years ago when physicists, frustrated as hell, invited philosophers. Paul's years ago, they invited philosophers to sit down to try to understand time. We know as remote viewers that we have to put temporal qualifiers on our work. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Many examples, even in the unit, where it's training target, let's say Pluto. There's two reasons why this happens. You're remote viewing Pluto and there's nothing going on, right? It's just dry at the time, 30 years ago. And all of a sudden, the viewer starts picking up a satellite, a motion on Pluto. And there's no satellites 30 years ago going around Pluto. Well, mind is outside of time. There's ergo our need for temporal qualifiers on our cues. So it moves ahead to look for some novelty and sees this thing here, like that. And I say, as an analyst, there's no satellites going around Pluto. What's going on here? We ran into similar problems, much more interesting at the same time. And I realized we've got to put temporal qualifiers on our work. Past, present, current, most recent. Next doesn't have to be, last. Next works, but last doesn't. Because last can mean two things. It can mean, this is the last time I'm going to see her. And the last time I saw her, so it's equivocal. And we have to be really rock solid. In TRV, as you know, if you're going against a complex problem by yourself, we're trained to work alone, of course, unlike other modalities. If two trained remote viewers agree upon the cue, go with it. Then it's not always correct, even because sometimes cues are very difficult to come up with. For instance, I can give you very interesting examples about free energy and what we ran into there. I was living in Albuquerque, and on that project, I paid my viewers probably close to $800 before I got a call from Mel Riley saying, hey, we thought that the engineered work, free energy work that Hal Puthoff was predominantly dealing with, a breakthrough might have been on their part, present day, because we're coming up with people and a machine that was working. But after I paid my viewers $800 or so, Mel O'Reilly calls me up and said, Ed, these people, they were faxing me. Faxing machine allowed me to move away. and work somewhere else. This was before internet stuff. I used dialogue, Lucky's dialogue. And Jacques was not only a proponent, but he helped develop Lucky. So I took Jacques to the field with me on a couple of occasions against UFO stuff. Crown Prince of Liechtenstein paid for those trips, but we found the site using remote viewing. So Mel calls me up and says, about those people, what? He says, they're not from around here. Okay, you mean Russian? Figuring that my contractor was not the one that was going to develop it, somebody else. We ran into this case with the Ford Motor Corporation too. They weren't happy when the first hydrogen-based automobile power plant was not going to be theirs. But story. Mel says, they're not from around here. I said, Russian? No, they're not from around here. Well, I forgot to put planet Earth as a Q qualifier because this machine was real, but somewhere else with some other people that didn't really, humanoids, that didn't really match a human contemporary Homo sapiens description. So not just hundreds, but thousands of examples against things like that where we fail and learn from the experience. U.S. Army has a technique at training grounds where they go, after the training is over, they go back, even in, I go into too many cases, but they reassess what went right and what went wrong, where they screwed up in a training environment, where if that had been a real world example, they would have been shot up or worse. So we take all these challenges over the last 35 years, these challenges, and try to come up with a search term for them that would work. This is why some of the search terms we come up with are golden. They're worth more than their weight in gold. Optimum health trajectory, we've saved, I almost say 100 lives. We've saved close to 30 or 40 lives using optimum health trajectory. So that's a keeper, that one. Anyway, so we have minds outside of time, so we have to use temporal qualifiers. If I remote view you, for instance, I have to use, present. I have to use the word present, right? Here's her. She's a murder victim. I guess I should say that. And I found her remains, and I found her murderer's house, where its present location. He's living in the same town where she disappeared. But I have to use present in this case. Otherwise, you or him are all over the place. In terms of continuity, not continuity of consciousness, and continuity of matter. That there's no now. Now is a moving now. If you try to pinpoint now, you can't. And if I try to, is the moment when we had the technical difficulty, is that moment an hour and a half ago or whatever, does that moment still exist in time? Yeah, it's as real as this one. But in terms of human linear thinking, the concatenation of time, just like the boxes that my biggest, in terms of operations, critical operations too, where life or death is, or deadly force is used, you have to be very, very careful about this time problem. That moment is just as real as this one. And our cultural conditioning is a huge, huge problem. Language is a box. It really is. Again, the linear way we think using Latin languages in order to express an idea, the concatenation of subject, verb, object, and things like that is a box. It's a real box too. All cultural conditioning is a box. We run into this a lot in our work. I speak fluent Chinese Mandarin, and one of the reasons I think that Asian cultures have a higher IQ than us in the West is because each of the ideograms that is a map, it starts out as a picture or a map. Those are processed in the right brain, in the right brain modality. Then, because they have to be connected with another idea picture, that's a linear thinking. So that's processed linearly on the left side of the brain. So as these kids grow up, as a child grows up, they're using both lobes concurrently each moment to process information. And that gives them an edge in terms of interpretation of puzzles and things like that that are difficult. They have an edge, and so they have a higher IQ. That's my hypothesis.
Mhm. Ed, before we can proceed to the Q&As for our guests and participants, it would be no interview if we wouldn't talk about your contact research to non-human entities. What is the driving force that pushes you forward?
The force that pushes me, it's the ultimate question of, Amelia Earhart. That used to be the big mystery of the century. Where's Amelia Earhart? Oh, we solved that. If you go into my forums, you can see where she's located. She was stranded. She landed her plane on the island, not where Rick Gillespie and his entourage said she's at. She's not there. She's on the next island over. That's all in the forums. Her and her navigator were stranded on that island and died there. I have the position of their bodies as well on the island. So that solves a mystery. In terms of the Sol Blanc, the white bird, that does more than solve a mystery. They beat Charles Lindbergh by 1 week against the jet stream, against prevailing winds. And they beat him by 1 week. They made it to the States, but they died in a crash about 100 miles from the New York harbor where they were going to land. They had pontoons. They jettisoned their landing gear upon takeoff, but they had the pontoons and they planned on landing in New York harbor to win this prize. And so I recreated all of that. But that not only solves a mystery, where did they go? But it changes a page in history. That's why the History Channel and things like that, they said, Ed, let's use this one here. Because not only solves a mystery, but retrieving the aircraft parts, I wouldn't go for the bodies because it's useless after all these years. That changes a page in history. They beat Charles Lindbergh across the ocean by a week too. And when I put that next summer, when I retrieved that thing, the French will love me. Americans will hate me. I mean, beautiful French women will put medals on my chest and shit like that. So that'll be fun. Nobody says this isn't fun, but it is. I mean, what's his name? Tom Cruise. Tom wanted to play me in the movie Suspect Zero, but he was tied up making The Last Samurai in New Zealand. We were shipping the dailies to him on the plane. You don't do that anymore. And that was fun. I have a cameo as an FBI remote viewing instructor in the movie. You walk up the stairs to Tom's office. It's really neat because you're too young to remember I Love Lucy, although a lot of young people find it and love that program. Lucille Ball. Well, he's in Lucille. He took over Lucille Ball's office at Paramount. So here's I Love Lucy photos all the way up the stairs. That was pretty neat. And the Man Who Stared Goats. If you have the backstory, I'm interviewed for part of the backstory on that DVD. So that's fun. It's a break from finding dead kids and going after monsters who kill them. That kind of stuff. So you have fun with this. But there's a ton. I mean, I took RV out of the confines of the intelligence community back and had the first website back in 1991. And It's as soon as I started broadcasting stuff, every psychic in the world was a remote viewer. That's absolutely true today. Oh, I remote view this, I remote that. Sure you do. Okay. If you want to call that remote viewing, I like Pam Coronado. That's fine. I'm close, but no banana. And you can be it. When I train natural psychics, I'm below average, or was, in terms of my birthright, in terms of my antenna, psychic antenna, consciousness antenna. But other people, nominally 15% of the population is way, way up there. They're way above average in terms of perception. Sometimes this is a problem. Empaths, for instance, that they, being an empath, it can be a curse. Walk down the street and you're picking up everybody else's emotions and trying to integrate them with your own. It's a mess. And that can be a curse. And I can correct that in 2 days. When I teach an empath, because in stage 4, you've got to be able to disassociate your own emotions from somebody else's, right? Whether they're a high-level animal or something, you got to be able to separate those two. There's no ifs and or buts about that. But if I train a really gifted psychic, and I have, wow, Paul, Mel, and Tom McNear, they're gifted psychics, but they're operators. They just continue to teach what they know. They haven't used applied it, and they're like, we have extremely difficult, complex, scientific and technical industrial places too. But if you train somebody like them, they become all stars, not just good programmer. They become all stars. That's a danger in our work in a company like I have and have had in the past. These people that are really, really good, you start to lean on them, just like any other job, whether it's a bank, military situation. The person that can get the job done every single time really well, you start to lean on them. And then they become prima donnas. And when they fall on their face and wreck a contract, it's really bad too. So you have to be, as a project manager, you have to be very, very aware of those potential defaults. Got what your question is.
Um,
Mine is a terrible thing.
My question went into another direction. I wanted to know shortly about your enthusiasm to make contacts to aliens.
Or I think it's imperative. We're going down as a species. I could wax at length about that. We're going down as a species. So I think for many, many reasons, one of which is to counter the globalists, so-called globalists, we need we need teachers. We've failed as a species, and it's going to cost us big. But if we had teachers who know a whole lot more about nature and reality, and we can assume they're more evolved too, they can step down to our level of communications, or just psychically, Bigfoot psychic, for instance. They can correct us perhaps before we self-destruct. I believe we're on the path to self-destruction too. When I looked ahead and I started using the remote viewing sci-spy unit for this and continued afterwards, I wanted to see, when I found out that remote viewing could look forward in time, accidentally at first, and then when we started using it, look forward in time, whether a couple of days or something else like that. My intent was to take a look at, look in the future, to see if there were any conflicts so that we could know about it and prepare. My job in another unit was to prevent technological surprise on future battlefields. So when I left that unit, stepped down to the remote viewing train, these guys didn't know who I was, know where I came from at first. I stepped down. I wanted to go for the juggler. Why make little plans? even though, I mean, that's a good approach, which I'll expand upon momentarily. But if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. That's a good credo. So we looked ahead using our newly developed skills, which some of the bugs worked out, to look ahead at big things, I'll call it, using a number of different cues, matrix search terms. And we saw that there was something big on the horizon. And it took almost a year and a half to figure out what the heck that was. So we eliminated nuclear war in terms of what we're perceiving. Wasn't that, and wasn't a meteorite, big meteorite or something. And it took a lot of work, and we finally realized, long story short, that it's our own star going on a rampage. And what did that mean technically? So we did all the technical analysis of what it means, and it means what's coming up. And we're in solar cycle 25, and people would ask, is there anything we can do about this in terms of infrastructure collapse, which I've talked about so often as a result of our star having a party? And that plus all the UFO stuff started coming up. The Navy came to me as an operations officer at the Sci-Spy unit. There were 2 Navy guys, and said, look, look at these photos. This is from the National Reconnaissance Office, which is now expanded into a big agency, NRO. Here's these 2 glowing spheres on top, above a Soviet boomer. My one of my exes, her father, was the navigation officer on the Carolina, a nuclear a Soviet boomer. He and I did not get along well at first. But anyway, I said, okay, give us 2 weeks. For a couple of weeks, interspersed with other clients, targets, we looked at this. And so they come back 2 weeks later and they say, what do you got? I said, you know what? They're real. It's real. It's not an aberration or something, an optical effect that's wrong or anything else like that. They're not from around here. What they're doing is they're surveying. They're taking a look at all the missile tubes on the boomer. They're taking a look at the actual warheads that are inside the buses. The buses, when ICBM goes ballistic, the bus separates from the booster, right? It opens up, and inside are the warheads, decoys or real ones too. So they get slung. This one goes to Cincinnati. This one goes to Malibu. This one goes to New York City. That kind of thing. It slings these guys off. They have built-in guidance system too, which is another story. Well, these things were just plasma balls. They weren't really material, just plasma, semi-material. So that got me started on really, okay, who is this? What is this? What's going on here? Certainly, and that started the whole search and taking a look at these. We now know the UAPs that I was in the first meeting ever that the U.S. government ever conducted to start taking a look at these things too. So we were in the skiff outside of Washington, D.C., in a corporate environment. I was the youngest member. We disguised ourselves as the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group. Al Puthoff was there. Many folks that you guys know was there. They try to get our teeth into, or at least get a foot in the door. What's going on out there too? You hark back in history to the first nuclear test in Nevada. You had these green fireballs, which we, as a small group, experienced in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. Same thing. This was Project Twinkle. Project Twinkle was the only project that ever established intelligent control behind one of these unknown things. Only one. That was back in 1951 when the tests first started. So I be a curious guy like I am. I said, this is the most curious thing out there. Nothing beats it. Nothing. And it was that drive to, yes, there are other many curious things. Ghosts, for instance. If we can establish, and my scientist son, it costs a lot of money. Now that I have gold, I can pay for it. Make him a laboratory to see if we can understand the nature of ghosts, because I believe that consciousness is working together with maybe the Briggs, maybe other thing. I think really it's in this case it's the Earth's consciousness. Loch Ness Monster. When I remote viewed that personally, interesting how it forms, but it's a dinosaur ghost. Bigfoot's something else. Bigfoot all of a sudden turns into an orb immediately. If you shoot one at it, disappears. You're not going to capture one. So those are real enigma, and they're common. They're recurring enigma too. If you guys come to my 13 January, I'll talk more about the actual protocols I'm using to sit down with a Bigfoot in the Stanislaus National Forest. I've talked about this in other places. But come on, there's no, all right, the deep state, the controllers, and all those folks finding out who they are, that's not hard to do. You don't need remote viewing for that. You just go to the city of London. Many of you have seen photos of one of the Rothschilds poking Prince Charles in the chest like this. Okay, it's on the internet too. Now, King Charles. But here's the Rothschild going like this: I own you. You are my bitch. You know, so the city of London, they own everything in the world, everything. They can own every corporation. And I've talked about this. And I have DVDs that cover all that. So that's not much of a mystery. But ghosts and Bigfoot and all these plasma balls are. So after RV Geofix was developed, I've taken a number, and you can see this in my forums, the actual overhead photography of all these things and their origin. What's the origin of this? Or if there's no origin, what's the source? I can use a ton of different examples where we have to solve problems for the International Seismology Conference and things like that, where they have an unknown, and we tackle that and show them what caused this particular seismogram in the Australian outback desert. And the closest they could get was a quarry explosion, but they realized that that didn't work either. So these kinds of mysteries are kind of dry. So I've taken a number of UAPs and looked at their source or origin, both. You have to experiment with terms to see if you're right or wrong. And in most cases, they're coming from the Pukao seamount. They're in the seamount as a start point, and the plasma project outwardly through different media. They're transmedia types of things going through air, water, and rock. I don't know if they're going through the rock. I think there may be another technology, perhaps nominally 100 million years ahead of us or something like that. This allows them to be there rather than go through anything. But scientists have asked me, Ed, what's the propulsion system for these things? Well, best I can do, right? Bicameral brain, planet Earth, we evolved against backgrounds, a lot of different backgrounds in gravity and Schumann resonant frequencies pumping the Earth. That there's certain things that we can do, and certain things that we can't. So what's a propulsion system? Well, it's like they create an electron hole, sort of like a semiconductor material where electrons are going through it. And then they move into this hole and they keep doing it. Oh, thanks a lot, Ed. Propulsion system. But the scientists that I've taken to Chaco Canyon, here's the Crown Prince of Liechtenstein sitting next to me. Nobody knows he's in the States except the princess and the Swiss ambassador, because he was the youngest billionaire at the time. In his castle, he's got a sealed vault underneath there with the greatest collection of Rembrandts in the world, too. He and the princess used to send me a Christmas card, and with the castle on beautiful Christmas garden. So I'm sitting here with him, and very interesting. He says, I know all these powerful people in the world and everything, but none of them are happy. They don't have peace of mind. So the kid listens. You don't talk. Somebody, of that stature and experience is talking to you. You listen. That was very interesting. They don't have peace of mind. But anyway, I asked these guys, setting up 31 channels of monitoring equipment output off, and the key engineer from the Skunk Works, the key engineer from the Stanford Linear Accelerator, they're all down there busy because action doesn't usually start until around 10 p.m. at night. So it's the sun's setting. Hey, any of you guys ever think about where these folks come from and who owns this stuff, or whether it's just a robot system that somebody left behind or whatever? Silence. All they cared about was re-engineering those things in the sky. That's all they cared about. They didn't care who built it, where they're from, or whatever, which was my idea. So I dropped them. I dropped all the engineers, went back to work to try to find who was messing with us. And over the years, I found that they are purposely contacting us, but they're using it as a conundrum, a problem to be solved. And only the wisest, only the smartest will be able to solve this conundrum. And remote viewing makes you smart. It's a higher level of mind. I wouldn't say consciousness. I think everybody's maybe at the same level. But it's a higher level of mind. It really expands your perceptual ability so that you can, it's the only thing I know that can solve this conundrum, and it has. So now I've got the right cues and things like that. I've been in the field before, gotten partial contact, had to come back to the drawing board and say, why do I only have partial contact? What am I missing? And figure that out. So I did that. And also, all the years of studying this phenomenon, it's fun. It's fucking fun. And I can't think of anything, well, maybe a couple things that are more fun, but it's exciting and it's not dull. And so, I mean, anybody can understand that. Some people are afraid. Ingo Swann was very afraid of extraterrestrials, even though he wrote the book Penetration and all that. I said, Ingo, you were abducted. I was not. Ingo, you were abducted. You watched it. So part of the reason he wrote Penetration is part of the abduction experience that he had that he will not recognize because he doesn't want to believe it. So Ingo was very frightening. He said, Ed, please don't look at them. You'll attract them. Yeah, come on, Ingo, that kind of thing. But it's the most fascinating thing. And so that's why I quit. That's why I quit. One of the reasons I quit the military, but there's another better reason. But that's why I stopped doing corporate contracts. It's because I can't talk about my research against these phenomena. I can't talk about the shape shifting and all those kinds of things, how they present themselves. And as I've said many times, where do we break through? There's only a few of us who are professionals that can do this. Where do we break through the lines? The Maginot Lines, for instance. So I chose that event in 1994 in Rua, Zimbabwe, outside of Harare, at that school event, the REL school. I chose that event to break through the lines, nothing else. Because the phenomenon is so wide and broad that we wouldn't be able to solve anything if we tried to jack across a broad front with a small task force. So I chose that. Some planning went into it, some resources went into it, even if these things are associated, with technologies that are far, far beyond us or whatever. I started there, full court press, all our viewers, again and again and again and again on this, but who are these things? What is this system? Maybe it's automatic, like I said. We want to find out. And that led me to realize that they aren't ETs. Now, ETs are involved in Mars. Paul Smith and I, we did a report. Paul and I, it was really neat. But and I'll talk about it in just a second. But these are what has been called by people independent of me, ultra-terrestrials. They're ultra-terrestrials. They seem to be able to parse back and forth through our own dimension and somewhere else. I don't have the brain to be able to describe things much more than that. That's why I want to meet them, for them to tell us who they are, what they are. And the other question I would have is, who are we? Take it from there. That's what I'm planning on doing. Paul and I did this report for German for Tom Tankowitz when I was working with him. Remember Tom?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Yeah, Tom had this something 3000 that we were putting together, and the Russians at the time, just after the Cold War, they were interested in what took out their Phoebus 2 spacecraft. Phoebus 1 was successful, it didn't break. The Phoebus 2, something weird happened to Phoebus 2, a Mars spacecraft. The Russians came to General Stubblebine, who was my chairman of the board. I appointed him chairman of the board because he loved remote viewing too. And one of the Russian psychics has said something about the demise of the spacecraft. It took a last picture, and it was a big bright light, and that was the last picture it took. So General Stubblebine came to me and said, "Ed, tackle this." And I talked to Tom about it. We made it into a saleable product. So the two viewers were Paul and I. What's neat about it is, one thing that's really neat about it is we both picked up on something coming up from the surface of Mars. Paul's description, he's very articulate, was it looks like sort of like it changes geometry. It's like a disc. I drew this discus shaped thing nestled down in the sand, and it rises up, and at relativistic speeds, you can't draw it when it's moving because the rear end is in a different time. It's moving at relativistic speeds. You can draw the front, but not the rear. But they're in two different times. It's going at relativistic speeds. But Paul says when it changes geometry, it looks like the Sydney Opera House. I thought was neat. And here's the thing: because we're working not at the same time, but independent of each other, we're still working it in the same time, really. If you understand unconscious, which is different than subconscious. He says we both used almost the same allegories to describe this thing. And I think Paul said it's like a loyal dog waiting for either Paul or I. We became the same person. I said it's like a junkyard. No, it's like a dog waiting for its owner. And I think it was Paul or me that said it's like a junkyard dog guarding its facility and waiting for its owner to come back. So we both used the dog allegory, which was obviously we were communicating with each other. The Hungarians, I sent a spy, famous man. I sent a spy to spy on the Hungarian Parapsychological Association. And they had found, independent in me, that when you use a group, I never use more than 6 viewers. It's overkill. And you as the analyst for that, you're dealing with a lot of overlapping stuff that you don't have to deal with. 4 viewers is great, professionals. 6 is max. There's no need for more than 6 viewers. Don't do it. But when you're working a group thing like that, with the Hungarians and I discovered independent of each other, is that there's a division of labor. For instance, if a husband and wife are working together simultaneously against the training target, let's say a classroom, one of them will pick up all the accoutrement, all the chairs, the tables, desks, and things like that. No people. The wife will pick up all the people and what they're doing. That kind of division of labor. Or if you're working with 4 people, they'll take an inside of a top secret laboratory and divide it up into quadrants. So there's no need for the overlap, the overkill kind of a situation. Mm-hmm. So As I said, I love problem solving, and they are presenting themselves to us in all different shapes and flavors. I don't know, Pascagoula pancake incident, this and that, and the other thing. And I firmly believe that the big phenomenon is directly or at least indirectly associated with with these ultra-terrestrials. So I'm going to continue that, and I'll brief all the public. I'll talk more about this. I'll expand upon this idea in a 4-hour Zoom on the 13th, Matrix Intelligence Agency, and go there and take a look at some of the work that we do.
I will put on a link for the Zoom call. Ed, now we should proceed to the Q&As. I saw there are some questions. The first question is, do you have any information or hints that there is some kind of existing government regimes, if any government is using remote viewing for its purposes?
No, I became, in terms of my government, I became the keeper of the keys. Believe me, there's lots of things I've done that would have shut me down, but I know what I'm doing. I have been, over the last 35 years, progressing and evolving this particular tool. They can see how effective it is. And yes, I've done some contracts for governments and things like that. So a funny thing, once I traveled to Germany with Joni Durf when she was alive to meet Tom. And when we came back, our phone bill in Beverly Hills was 2 months late, 2 months. And it should have been shut down, after 1 month, thing like that. But because the FBI, who monitors all my phone calls, including interviews like this, they didn't want to lose any information from the source. So they told the phone company, don't shut it down. That kind of thing. So, it's a common question, is the government still using this? Well, I don't think so, because look at why it was shut down. It became a white elephant and a real burden. I mean, you can see my interview with Sputnik magazine, Sputnik Radio. I did an interview with them on the source of a radioactive isotope that was in the atmosphere in Russia. And everybody was blaming the Russians. Said, no, it's a power plant in Belarus. And they kept the leak quiet because they didn't want to be blamed for the leak that everybody was monitoring now in the atmosphere in Sweden, places like that. And in that interview, I talk about why the unit was shut down. First of all, some administrative stuff. When we got turned over to the Defense Intelligence Agency, where I became, instead of just dropping in from my other units, I became assigned to this unit. It was the Defense Intelligence Agency. The DIA has no charter to collect intelligence. None. This is wiggle room there. It's classified, but they have no charter to collect. It's an analytical agency. We were collecting. I took some shit from Fern Gavin and what's his name. It reached a point. Fern Gavin he said, I'm going to kill you. So I started packing my gold cup, my 45, 1911 45 gold cup competition match 45 in my pants, because I expected him to shoot me in the place. I had to pack my 45 to work because he said, I'm going to kill you. And so you can't remote view under conditions like that or run any operation. I thought, this is good. When they brought the witches in and things like that. But predominantly, it started out with CIA. When CIA owned the unit, they coveted the unit. There's lots of detail about it, but they coveted that. They got caught after the Bay of Pigs invasion. The head of the DCI, Director of Central Intelligence, his name is changed by now. I mean, the title has changed. They said, what other hip pocket organizations do I have that could bite me in the ass like this Bay of Pigs fiasco? So, well, there's this, and this, and we didn't want to tell you about this because we didn't think we thought it would disturb you and all that. And then there's this remote viewing unit too. Get them all out. all like that. So the Army took over. The Army started paying for the contracts and for our contract. But then when we're finally ended up in the hands of DIA, you had General, very good general. I forgot his name, but once you hit 3-star generals, okay, it becomes totally political, and you don't want to get burned when somebody finds out that DIA has psychics working for them. That's not going to go well with Congress when Congress wants to appoint you to the chief of staff or something else like that to get your 4th star. So DIA was transparent with their boss there. He's out, get him out. So in the end, the CIA took him back, but it was with the witches. They took him back with the witches. When the witches were assigned, I was livid. I started writing, looking for the next assignment. I was livid. Fern, you're going to use a tarot card reading and spontaneous remote viewing, squiggles, and mix them up. We got to find hostages in Lebanon, Terry Waite, Colonel Anderson, Terry Higgins. I think you're going to mix up that. We're sitting in front of Jack Verona, and Fern Gavin is saying we should use this too. That's it. I'm out of here too. When the witches were assigned, congressmen who had been briefed upon the billet structure had only 100 billets. So only 100 people could be briefed on the existence, the special access program type of thing on our unit. If one got debriefed, you could add another one. And some of the Congressional Oversight Committee were briefed on our existence. They used to come up because they were really intrigued, right? And get that, what Mel Riley called the psychic blowjobs, because we were the red light district of the Intelligence Committee. Everybody wanted us, but nobody wanted to be associated with us, right? Because it would ruin their career. So this is the truth of the matter. So we were a hot potato, and but for a while there we were really good. We failed in a lot of missions because of what I said I had to fix. But we're still doing good stuff. Yeah, just not complex stuff. Where's the drugs? Where's this kind of stuff? Yeah.
There's another question about forbidden targets or targets which serve some kind of danger if you are focusing on them or if you are working on them. What can you say to that?
The only danger I know about and has been described to me, there's only one type, and that is before the advent of coordinate remote viewing. The Army was employing psychics, natural psychics, and Fern Gavin and I had to work out the names of things because things were changing. So Fern agreed with me that we should call the now evolving coordinate remote viewing technical remote viewing. And the other stuff that he was doing, the tarot card reading and the automatic writing, he called something else. But the original protocols that we started with, we decided to call extended remote viewing. That was the term that Fern liked, extended remote, where you lay on the bed. We've been through this before. I've had Paul in there, and the techniques are complex, and there's no need to go into them now. But they are exciting, I have to say, where you have a gifted psyche in an altered state, and we could measure them electronically. For instance, if we had instruments on them, a voltage gauge or an oscilloscope that measured cross-body voltage from knee to head, the voltage, when the voltage started dropping down to 0 and then crossed the 0 point, they were ready for their target. I'm not going to go into the details about it. They were ready for their target. Or if you had an oscilloscope with the same measurement points, when the sine wave flipped, they were ready for their target in that environment. And there was a heart attack. The previous, I was the second operations officer. I was the first training officer in terms of remote viewing. I was the second number. Fred or Skip ran the show, and Skip probably, without Skip, I don't think there would ever be a remote viewing program in the U.S. Army. It's pretty fair to say. But Skip told me that there was a couple of instances where, unknowing to the viewer, you don't want to do something like this to, for instance, if some of the real world cases I've worked, one in Arizona, where we're looking for an abducted child, a young Mexican mom set the baby outside of a porta potty at a swap meet, took her 5-year-old girl into the porta potty, go to the bathroom, leaving the baby outside in the carrier, gone. So we took that on, assuming, I mean, you can sell a baby for a lot of money on the black market. We assumed it was one of those. We just find the baby. Baby's dismembered and put down the garbage disposal, right? And I mean, trained pros have to be able to deal with shit like this. This is a bad one too. You certainly would not want to give that to a sensitive new age community yoga teacher as a remote viewing target in the first week of targeting. They'll throw up, they'll vomit, they'll head for the couch, and they'll never come back. So I mean, that's common sense type of stuff. But all of a sudden, there's a lot of stuff that goes along with that. If you send a viewer, even a new pro, sometimes, to a site where the little man at the liminal gate wants to protect your psyche, but Dame says remote view, this is ground zero at Nagasaki and Hiroshima during the attack. When you get into stage 4, what happens immediately is not stage 4 overlay. It's something else, which you and I know about. It's something else where you shut down because your psyche is trying to protect yourself from this horrible event. So you get into AI, so, oh, happy, joyful, things like that. No information, stops all information. Oh, happy, joyful, outside, that kind of thing. So I purposely put pros through those kinds of targets to introduce them to what the mind is doing in terms of, in this case, in terms of protecting the psyche at the unconscious level, at the preconscious level. But one of the operators that Skip had, Skip started trying using remote viewing. Joe McMonagle particularly, you've seen the Mars stuff like that. His Mars work, it's on the web everywhere. Quite fascinating stuff. He started using it against the ET problem. And one of these ultra-terrestrials at one point, for instance, if you remote view Travis Walton, that's not a fake event like there are many. There's a real event. There was a real structure, and inside the structure were 4. One of my pros and I did a lot of work on 4 of these wraith-like things, wraith, semi-visible, whatever, that were the entities that decided to suck Travis Walton up in that experience, Fire in the Sky movie, that kind of thing like that. And what Fred did, Skip did, was take the guy on the couch, and instead of who thought he was going to be used on a military operation, describe the space, blah, 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 or whatever, submarine. Paul had a very funny thing with the submarines, doorknobbing. Paul was so interested. Blind target, CIA was attempting to discern whether the rumors of a titanium behemoth were true or not, and Paul was against that. I was the monitor at the time. I'm really frustrated because Paul, he's got nice sketches and everything, but there were the conning tower, all these things sticking up, antennas and crap from the conning tower. He was feeling around doomsday superalien. He was doorknobbing. That's the term that most removers understand. Now, in my mind, I was thinking, come on, Paul, do the rest of the sketch. That's doorknobbing. Fred put this viewer who thought he was going to be involved in the military in one of those situations where, when the viewer came back, one had a heart attack, but when the other one came back and said, they're looking right at me. And in the one case where the heart attack happened, that's what happened. scared to death, and a heart attack, heart rate trend or something like that. Doesn't matter. So that's the only case that I know about where that was a harmful position for somebody to be in. It was completely, I mean, you are completely, that all the controls with the monitor trying to keep you from falling asleep right at the edge of wakefulness and sleep, right? Keep you at that edge where you're operating as an operator. And they're totally dependent, all control is given up to you, the monitor. They trust you 100%, right? So wherever they're going to put you, you have to go. And that was an unfortunate example, but it's the only one I know. Now, sometimes if you, on some classes of targets, there's a physical reaction. If you're right-handed and you're using right hand to put down information, for instance, there can be stinging or hot sensation in your hand. The room could feel, there's a vanilla smell. Sometimes it happens, and that's those actions are on the part of angels, which are real. So when you're dealing when the angel intervenes in your session, those kind of things happen too, but they're rare.
Another question is, do you know any developments for creating devices for doing remote viewing or supporting remote viewing?
No, that's come up a long time ago. I mean, Colonel Alexander became a very good friend of mine, and one of the most valued friends I've ever had in my life, just because you talk about out of the box thinking. Well, that's John. And there was a rumor that the Czechs were developing psychokinetic weapons. And John kind of followed up with that in papers that are quite available in books that he's written, and papers that were influential at higher levels of our government, the Department of Defense. But in reality, no, not yet, at least. In the last chapter of my autobiography, Tell Me What You See, I have a scenario, a hypothetical scenario, based upon what I know about China, where the Chinese use a room full of students, young men, young kids, to disable the navigation device on a U.S. ballistic missile test. It's not so hypothetical. There you're dealing with our sister science, telekinesis, psychokinesis, things like that. And we've used remote viewing to gain insight about psychokinesis and things like that, the Uri Geller effect. So to do that, you guys know how to do that based upon the clinics, where you take an actual example where any reasonable person would say, this is an example of psychokinesis, and you use that as your target. And in the site template, final site template after an hour of work or something, will be all the essential elements of information, EEI, of the problem and the solution in diagrammatic form, not archetypic form, in diagrammatic form too. So you'll recognize the kid, or if it's one kid, you'll recognize the kid diagrammatically, the location as context, and anything you don't recognize in the diagram, that's the key. In this case, psychokinesis, telekinesis, that's the key to understanding how it happened. Then you use those things solely in follow-up sessions, off the base session, solely as research jump-off points too. So we've learned a lot about it. But you know, life is short, and it's what you can see as you and I learned the first time we were correct, first time we got the Eiffel Tower correct or whatever. It's like, it's a life-changing experience. The idea that you have the potential, limited to some degree, but not much, to know anything. This changes your life, you know, forever. You can't not go back into the mode of thinking that you had prior to that first experience. This is why I kudos to IRVA, because it's going to give thousands and thousands more people that experience. And remote viewing will come out of the closet after that.
I agree. Yes, I make the same experience.
Yeah.
There's another interesting question. The question is, do you cooperate with a super intelligence or entity? Somebody outside
Mhm.
who are
I do. I
cooperating?
do. Yes, I do. What I've tried to get through to so many remote viewers, it's difficult to do though, is that when I work a target, whether it's ARV, not ARV so much, but when I work a target, I have a partner. My higher mind can do things that I cannot do, and I can do things that it cannot do, like set up a problem, things like that. And it's my partner. It's my complement of being, too. It's my higher mind. And occasionally, it's something else. It's a guardian angel. My guardian angel, for instance, can intervene, stop me from looking at something perhaps, because it can see through time. It can say, if you do this in terms of a decision analysis, event-driven decision analysis, you're going to be on this particular pathway here, which might be deleterious to your health or somebody else's, or you have better work to do over here. So steering and timing on the part of the higher mind, yeah, I've learned is very real. Higher mind. So it's my partner. I listen to it, and when I'm reviewing, I trust it to give me information I need to solve a problem. And the others, I have a picture here, a painting. It's an actual painting, reproduction of a 1630 painting of Saint Jerome, who was one of my favorite guys, one of the three founders of the church. He's looking up. You can't see the misty light, but he's taking dictation from angels. He's acting as a transducer. They take the ideation and convert it into the language of the time. That kind of thing too. So I like that photo very much in that context, because it reminds me of what we're doing as what I'm doing as a remote viewer many times. But I'm a firm believer in God, our creators, and it's in terms of meaning value. Meaning value means a lot to me. Each day I assess what I'm doing, what's going on, because my remote viewing time and resources are very limited. So I want to go with the biggest bang for the buck. So I say, okay, should I help out on this missile program over here at JPL, or should I go find this kid? What's the meaning value? Well, over here at JPL, that problem set is transitory. But finding this kid is of eternal value. It's past my lifetime. It has meaning through time. That thing over there is just transitory, temporary, of temporary value. So that's how I adjudge things that are going on. And if you take that down, you distill it all the way down. You know, what has the most meaning value? And to me, it's my connection with my creator, with God. So I use that as a touchstone. My connection, look where I'm pointing. It has nothing to do with mine. You can't tell me about your spiritual experiences. You can't do it. You can use poetry, things like that, which people have done really neatly to try to get close. But this has nothing to do with word ideas, that connection there. If I'm looking at you coming up to me after a meeting or during a break somewhere, and you're the type of person, American, that says, oh, I'm so interested in your work and this, that, and the other thing, about blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at your eyes and I'm seeing that there's congruence with what you believe. Looking there. Oh, there's no congruence. So, thank you very much. I walk. I'm not interested, but you're living a lie. I'm only part of someone living a lie. That kind of thing. So that touchstone for me, I use it as a touchstone in every decision I make, especially in terms of remote viewing. What has the most meaning value? Not to me, my mind, but to that touchstone. So that's how I conduct myself through life. I didn't know it used to be that way. Oh, believe me. And it wasn't with his either. St. Jerome was a womanizer when he was young and all of that until he got the message. Just, until you start really looking at reality.
Mhm.
What was the question? Oh, yeah.
Do you prefer any preparational exercises for people who want to optimize their remote viewing? Some kind of preparation that helps to calm down or to focus at the start of the...
I think perhaps meditation would be helpful, but in terms of that, actually getting ready to view yourself, in terms of your CRV, is you don't really have to do that. We're in a theta state is our gateway, right? If you're trying to remote view and talk at the same time, that's not very effective because you're trying to use theta and your partner to extract information from the signal line, but you're in the beta state. So that's not optimizing anything. The protocols themselves that Ingo developed, TRV especially, my development, is after 2 or 3 minutes, you're in theta. The protocols themselves take you to theta. If I'm arguing with one of my ex-wives, can't remember how many, but I'm in an argument with them, right? If I have to remote view because I've got a contract or a job, a kid to find, and I start 3 minutes into the session, your resources, your capacity constraints are narrowed. You don't have time for the arguments and things like that. They're narrow. They're focused entirely upon working with your higher mind against the target too. Now, when you stop remote viewing, you put the pen down, you stop going, where was it? Oh yeah, that bitch, that kind of thing like that, because you don't have time to argue. There's not enough capacity to do that when you're remote viewing. There's something else I wanted to say. Oh yeah, it's very similar, when you wake up from sleep. If you're right-handed person, you recreate your world, your reality visually. You track wherever you're at on a battlefield or in your bedroom from left to right. So you establish visually the space where you are at. Then you have to recreate why you're there. This only takes 8 seconds or so to pull up. Then you recreate who you are based upon what you did before you went sleep. Your fears and desires and all that are dealt with at the dream level. You've heard me talk about dreams many times. What happens in the dream state, and we can pull out the information using a dream seed. But in dreams, that's where you process stuff. Now, your higher mind tries to get information through to you in dreams, but since it's at the only time we're at the unconscious level is dreaming, moments of revelation, which are rare in human life, and remote viewing. When we're sleeping, we're in delta, and you're processing the fears, and we go through life that way. Fear and desire, fear and desire, fear and desire, and then we die. Okay, that's what most people do. And in your dreams, if unconscious needs to tell you about something important, trying to process all that information that you need to process, that's why you have to sleep. You need sleep, otherwise you die. Processing that information, but unconscious has something to tell you that's very important, that eclipses all the processing stuff. But what happens is, my analogy is that message is like a snowball on top of a hill, a snowy hill. And the 2 hours, let's say, of delta, REM sleep, delta, where you're in delta, the snowball starts to roll down the hill, gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But it picks up all this detritus and debris, rocks and gravel like that. So by the time it hits the bottom of the hill and stops, it's this big snowball with a lot of crap in it, dirt, things like that, pine needles and stuff like that. But the original message that unconscious tried to get to you is in there somewhere. So what we did, we experimented over time. We remote viewed Bob's dream of a battlefield, repetitive dream. Bob had a recurring dream of a battlefield, right? So what we use is that we use that as target reference material. Bob's current recurring battlefield dream, that becomes the target, and we hit it. And we find out that at the end of our session, because your best friend, this is your best friend, that higher mind. Its key job is to keep you alive. Everything after that is icing on the cake. So we find out that Bob has pancreatic cancer. Bob, you have pancreatic cancer. You need to see a doctor. That's that snowball, that start point. But it gets all messed up and mucked up in the processing stuff that we do. That's why if you can clear your mind when you meditate, and most people think they're on this clear, but it's not. Yogis, for instance, they're in pure alpha. Studies have been done about yogis who are buried for a couple of days, right? Then they're dug up. They stay in pure alpha. And this was actually studied by the US Navy, along with some other stuff too. Fascinating work. But if you really want to understand, remote view, you have to study your mind too. In Vietnam, during the Vietnam era, a lot of our pilots were being shot down over not Vietnam, but Laos and Cambodia and places like that. We had to literally call President Johnson at his ranch in Texas to get permission to fly into those countries because we had no business Cambodia and Laos officially, right? And by the time Johnson gave his permission, the pilot was captured by the NDA or losing my mind. Mind's a terrible thing, or the Viet Cong, and missing. So what we did was develop a program where we would take non-Americans, Cambodians, and mostly mountain yard tribesmen in the mountains in Laos, send them to Fort Rucker, where the school, Rotary Wing School was. I was supposed to be the class leader at a Cobra gunship, but I turned it down to be a spy for something I can't talk about when I was enlisted. So anyway, we sent them there and we put them through a jump start, really quick class on how to fly a helicopter. So they could fly an unmarked helicopter into Cambodia and Laos and pick up the pilot before he was grabbed by the enemy. But there wasn't enough time to teach the mountain yard tribesmen aerodynamics. So if they got a rotor shot off, they didn't understand aerodynamics. They didn't even understand inertia or anything else. Because if that tail boom is still in place, there's a possibility that if you know what you're doing, to tilt the chopper and maintain continuity and crash that thing into the ground without killing everybody, right? But it was a crash course too. Well, this is similar to what remote viewers do. They try to, they call it. I had a British student. He's in stage 4, really screwing up. It's the other very positive aspect, but screwing up again. And I didn't pull my knife out, but I wanted to. That kind of thing. And I said, why are you doing that in stage 4? And he says, well, it's telling me to. I said, it's telling me, what's the it? And he says, the matrix? No, the matrix is where the it goes to grab a pattern of information to be transduced into word ideas on paper. I said, the it is your higher mind, your non-analytical superior mind, otherwise, ergo higher. Those kind of things. So Ingo, he did this, except there's a couple of in the metaphysical arena, which does enter the picture sometimes, especially when you're trying to win a sports betting game over and over and over again. It's going to stop you from doing it. If all that money, and we call this the Rosetta syndrome, because I had somebody like this. Yes, we won as a group a lot of money in Vegas and sports betting, parlay betting, but we knew from prior experience, especially David. David did not stop. He didn't believe. David calls me up and says, I just did 100 associative remote viewing targets like we've been doing against sports betting. and they were 100 were sign missing. I should have put a camera in this room and bet on the opposite team. I would have made a fortune too. All sign missing. And I told him, I said, you know, don't you understand what's going on here? Is that your higher mind, your best friend, is doing this to you. It's what's negotiating all the work in the session. You met a girl, a pretty girl from New Zealand. You ended up getting married to her. Now you have a good business up there in Seattle, selling textbooks, used textbooks to students. You're doing really well for yourself, and you guys are happily married. But that's going to change. If you keep going back to Vegas and doing what I taught you to do and winning that money, your wife's going to be very attracted to that. You know, saying, yeah, go back and do it again. And David, it was funny. He went to India, went, to ashrams and places like that, where you leave your ego at the door. But David straps it back on. I have a big ego, but it better not be in my session. I can strap it back on. But the money, what would happen was it would ruin their lives. It would be totally focused on money instead of the things that brought them together and would keep them together. He absolutely refused that. He said, no, we're going to make it work for you. That's studying what we're doing at a deeper level. That level will still be there when we die in terms of continuity of consciousness. We're pretty sure about that. Science is. And so there's a lot to learn, not just in terms of the 30 years that you guys have missed operationally, but in understanding the process itself.
How can people reach you by email, Ed?
Say again, please.
How can people reach you by email? How can they make contact to you?
Well, I think it's Major Ed Dames don't write this down. Major Ed Dames at remoteviewingmatrix.com. If you go to remoteviewingmatrix.com and you want to send me an email, that's there. But please don't bother me too much if I give you my direct email, because I'm busy. But my direct email is director@matrixintelligenceagency.com. That's my direct email.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, there's another question. How do you see similarities between remote viewers and snipers?
What was the last word?
Sniper.
Snipers?
Yes.
If you look at my business card, grab it. So I have there's a card in one of my do you see that watermark? That's a Mongolian warrior on horse. Mongolian horses are smaller in Texas. Mares. Mongolian war, running from an enemy, galloping horse. He spun around 180 and shooting an arrow at the pursuer. And I chose that logo because it reminds me of the discipline and the accuracy that we need in remote viewing, the focus. That kind of focus is exactly similar, analogous to the kind of focus we need in remote viewing, with all the distractions around us in both bottom up as in the psychological community, all the distractions around us. We have to be able to get through all that and still focus on and maintain that focus too. So that's as close as I could get to a marksman or a sharpshooter or something like that. But it's about the same thing, and then, allegorically speaking.
There's one question I don't grasp it totally. I only can read it. As remote viewing was conceived within the intelligence, military defense and national security community and has now somehow extrapolated floating independently into civilian applications. How can we viewers work to reintroduce into intelligence communities around the world with all its potential? I think it shouldn't be done, but what do you think?
That's three questions, and including some non sequitur there. And I'm not going to go into the two initial questions, but in terms of the last part, the internet scared the hell out of the deep state. Lawrence Rockefeller, you can find this C-SPAN television, him and C-SPAN, late Lawrence Rockefeller. I worked for him at one point. You can see when he realized that, see, people like him, people of his ilk, the City of London type of folks, when they thought that the internet was just a joke, a hobby for hobbyists, right? Like I think, I've said, some of you guys are not remote viewers, you're RV dilettantes, aficionados, RV hobbyists. That's what most people are these days out there. And they thought, the Rockefellers thought that this is not going to hurt us. There's no way. Until they realized people are talking to each other and bypassing media that they control, own and control, and they're not a good thing, right? This kind of transparency across the globe. So you can see Rockefeller standing up in front of his colleagues and saying, this should be stopped, nipped in the bud right now. That's on C-SPAN. You can see him saying that too. Well, they think that's bad, and and it is in terms of their logic. Remote viewing is far worse, because they don't control your mind. They have no control over thousands of people's mind. It's like a Village of the Damned, the old movie, very old movie, but it's a classic. The Village of the Damned, all these kids, their mind is unified, and they can see things together as like the board type of thing. So remote viewing should be taught to as many. I submit to you they should be taught in elementary school. I developed and I've shown you guys in the clinics, my clinics, how my son was extremely successful using my children's protocols, obviously, and even teenagers. Don't try to teach a teenager who wants to learn remote viewing. Don't give them any theory. Sit down, put the pencil on the paper, and just do what I say. Because if you try to teach them theory, they're laying on the ground, bored to hell, right? You can't do it with a teenager. Teenager's attention span these days is like a half a page of a Google search, period. And they're gone. You lose them. So just for a child, children are amazing because you don't have to ask them to open their mind. It hasn't closed yet, like us staid stoic old fogies. They're incredible. And I show you the example of my kid, the protocols that I set up for him. The teacher, Mrs. So-and-so, puts a tag on something in her house, right? She's told about what the experiment is, of course. Puts a tag in the course, and 5 girls, 5 boys in the 5th grade, 10 years old. Enoch is the project manager. He remote views the target himself using the protocols. Then he approaches 4 of the boys and 5 girls. And the kids will normally say, okay, after Enoch said, Mrs. So-and-so put a tag on something in her house, and I want you to tell me what it is. How can we do that? Okay. Because kids they don't have any there's no prohibitions in their mind. They're open-minded, free. So Enoch has these 10 questions too, and they're simple. And it took me a long time to develop the right ones. They're simple. Is it heavy? Does it have moving parts? What's its texture? Kids usually don't know what texture is. So Enoch does have to introduce a couple of textures, colors, shapes. Is it big? Is it heavy? Kids start to use their hands and things like that. Then, at the end, and this is really neat. do you like it? Question, last question to the kid. Do you like it? No. Why? It's for girls. Boy speaking. Girl, do you like it? Yeah. I really like it. It's fun. That equates to asking a person after stage 2, aesthetic impact. How do you feel about the target? Which people don't realize, it not just at face value, it's supposed to dump any energetic charge that you had after going through stage 1 and 2, because you have to stay neutral, right? But it does more than that. It pulls you in further to the target. That's a dual purpose. Get rid of the drama charge, if any develop, that's going to lead you in AOL, and pulls you in. So do I like it or not? That's where the mind really starts engaging, something that's like stage 4 earlier. Okay. So anyway, it's over, and the science judges come in the next day. Now, do you remember I taught you this, Gunther, and in the clinics?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, okay. So the science judges come in. Here's a big board with the protocol on it. And the question is, do 5th grade students have natural ESP? You know, Mrs. So-and-so puts his egg on, and all the rest of the stuff too. And here's the results, the sketches of each of the 10 kids, right? So the judges have never seen anything in New Mexico, have never seen anything like this before. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to think. They just walk right on by to the smoking volcano with a frog cut up and things like that. So I get a call from the teacher. And Enoch did great, because I had started teaching him RV when he was little. He did great. He had this, he sketched this bag, this sack, about that big, with 3 girls' heads sticking out of the bag, out of this bag. And what the target was, the teacher's daughter had a Barbie bag with the Barbie's dolls sticking out of it like that. And that bag was there for the judges to see. So they're looking at sketches like that, and they're looking at the actual target. That's why their mind went nuts. I get a call from the teacher. Oh, Mr. Daines, please don't do something like this. Don't let the parents know what you do for a living. What are we in the Bible Belt or something like that? No, but you can't understand. These parents, it's not something they can comprehend, and they'll be scared. Okay, well now. So the next year, Dad, help me out with my science experiment. To my younger son, 2 years younger, he comes up, and so I say, okay, let's do something different. People always wonder about how long fish can live out of water. But we get down to the pet store, get 3 danios, 3 cardinal tetras, and 3 loaches, crown loaches too. And my oldest son, gets permission to leave his class and go down and help out with his brother's experiment. So 3 cardinal tetras. Number 1, click this many minutes out of order. Number 2, we go through all that. Here's the average for each species. How long can this species live out of water, right? So I had a call from the teacher. Mr. Daines, girls were crying and kids were crying and things like that. And please, why did you do this? I said, okay. You again, it's the same teacher. Oh, this again? Okay, I'll tell you what. Next year, in the not the 5th, in the 4th grade, my youngest in the 4th grade, here's what we're going to do. We're going to see how long puppies can live underwater. Oh, down he goes. Sorry to get sidetracked. Yeah, I got to have some fun sometimes.
There are two more questions about psychic abilities. What can you say about Ingo Swann's psychic abilities, and what about your psychic abilities before you got in contact to remote viewing?
I had no psychic abilities to speak of that I knew about, none. And when I was selected to go to train with Ingo, I just didn't know what to think. It's like I can't in any way, shape, or form envision myself as being able to do this. I just can't. So I went with an open mind, but it wasn't open. I believed that I could not do this. But that's fine. Once Ingo says, put your pen on the paper and follow instructions, you can believe whatever you want. You're going to do it. It's just like any other skill, coaching. You need a coach. You know, I couldn't dive off the diving board very well when I was in college, and I was taught by a former U.S. Olympic coach, a water polo coach, how to correctly dive in 1 minute. Just 1 minute. That's all it took. Like that, nothing complex. But dive correctly too. So it doesn't matter what you believe. In fact, I told him, I've been in the Army before, and you're going to get pushed out of the airplane. You hesitate and all that. So he's telling me what to do. And I said, you're just going to push me. Like so many times in the military. You learn how to swim this way. The Marine Corps, you know, famous for that. You can't swim? Oh, in the pool you go. So no, 1 minute. You just need the right coach. And, you know, and that led up to my moment of astoundment when I got the perfect drawing of the Washington Monument, and it went on from there. But understanding people's minds now, because when I train person to person, I have to be right inside your head, and I am. It's a clockwork orange, but I know exactly how it works. Whether you're on target, whether you're moving off the target, doing that, and I will let you make those mistakes because you need to know them in order not to make them again. Make your mistakes in the classroom outside. But Ingo was one of the best natural, publicly known Western psychics. Ella Hammond was there, Keith Harari to some extent. Even Jacques Vallée took some lessons from Ingo. And well, there's so much I could say about him, and I spent so much time alone with him. So he was a little bit cautious with me because he knew I wasn't like the other viewers. I came from a different substrate, and the kinds of things that I was tasked with doing were very. He writes about that too. That I would have to brief the president and things like that. So it was a little bit different, but I was at I had an office at Los Alamos National Laboratory, as well as all the other places NSAC. And I was there talking about remote viewing in Ingo. And one of the scientists in the room, there were only 4 scientists and me in the room, said, we've had an experience with Ingo Swann. And he showed me on a whiteboard, I think he had the actual photo, of this place, this Russian island, where they asked him to remote view using coordinate remote viewing, right? And Ingo sketched that Ingo drawings and stage 6s were mirror images of the island. He drew the island from the bottom up, okay? So the way you look down planimetrically, the planimetrics of the island were reversed. It was the mirror image, as if Ingo had viewed it from below to above. All of the structures on that reversed planimetric, everything, hangars, airplanes, whatever, air defense, was all perfect. But the scientists rejected it because Ingo drew it in mirror image. Rather, no, really, they'll do anything to reject psychic stuff. Caltech University. You can see one of the many documentaries of remote viewing. The scientist at Caltech wrote it off completely. He said, there's no electronic emission, there's no electronic connection whatsoever at any EMF wavelength to connect with the target. There's nothing there, so there can be no information transmitted. So he smirked like most of them do, walked away. Not even imagining that there may be other components to consciousness that would bypass things like speed of light transmission and other stuff. But Ingo, all I could say about him is what I've already said. Growing up in Telluride, Colorado, at 18 years of age, realizing he had an ability, and he wondered how it works. That's when he became very early in life subject to himself study. How am I doing this? Looking at the cognitive behavior of what happens moment to moment to moment to moment until I put this pattern together. And the other famous viewers did not do that.
Ed, I think we have reached the end of our session. We are overdue for more than 60 minutes. Thank you very much for all that interesting stuff and all the answers to the questions.
Well,
very well.
Anyway, happy New Year to you guys too. And I'll help. You guys need some help. RVA needs help. And I promise I won't sing my song again. Well, no, I won't promise, but I'll try not to sing my song again. And let me help you. Let me actually go over the mistakes that you're making that will cause you not to be able to pursue operations and corporate and make some real money out of this, because you'll be in demand if you go pro, because there's so few people in the world that know how to do this. Only a select few can do this stuff. I can charge as much as I want, and corporations pay it. For instance, the hydrogen-based automobile power plant with a Ford Motor Corporation. When my final analysis, my final report to Phil Carver, who was the best friend of U.S. former Vice President Werman, he said, "Ed, what you've given me is something that all of my 150 researchers," Bechtel has 300. Bechtel in their research division have 300 people in their R&D, but Ford has 150. He said, "What you've given me is something that none of my analysts have even thought about. And this is something I can take to the 17th floor of Dearborn, Michigan, headquarters for Motor Corporation, that kind of thing, and really make myself look good." Make yourself look good. And that's what it comes down to. You work for corporate VIPs. It's just like the Senate Intelligence Committee guys coming up for the red light district. They want to know about them. They see how powerful this is, what you do. Well, what can you tell me about me? And that was very difficult for me to handle, because you go in the Army and you realize that there's no individuality. You're working for the team. And which is what I had no concept of somebody caring more about themselves than their company. So I had to learn about that, having grown up in the Army, other places, and that's what you're going to run into. There's all kinds of things you have to learn about when you run contracts and consulting. But learn it. Go out and conquer.
I think this is a very good first step for the future of remote viewing, to wipe out the errors and to clean up our minds in a way that we can stay for a long time in an alternate state from everyday life and collect data. And I think you have elaborated very, very many high-level tasks that are not known in the remote viewing community. And without these high-level tasks, everyday problems will not be able to be solved.
Right. No, that's correct. And I can add one more thing before we say, auf Wiedersehen, and that's the reason I've chosen these tasks, because in the even if what you said is true, and it is, you're still going to scare many people. You're going to frighten many people. This is going to be taken as an intrusive thing, and mind readers and all that, and especially to people who are not mentally balanced. We've seen that. I've seen it plenty of times. But my task in getting the common man, and I'm going to be doing a lot of maybe television programs and some other things this year. My job is to, one of the reasons remote viewing was rejected by the military community is because it needed, in Western scientific method, you need a theory, not just a working hypothesis. You need a theory, and you need a replicability. We certainly had the replicability, but we don't know how this works. We still don't know how it works, right? Like trying to understand consciousness. And because that theory was missing, this was eschewed at numerous levels, sort of like acupuncture. Acupuncture was rejected by the West for decades, many decades too, because it had replicability, but it didn't have a theory. It did have a theory, but one that the West did not understand. When I would brief at the National Security Council, vice presidents there, all these big, well, first they look at your clothes. They look at how you look. Style over substance. I had to accept that. I had to learn about it and make sure that I took care of that. So my hair was cut, my groomed, shoes polished, Italian shoes, Italian belt, Spanish tie, Italian suit, all that stuff. So I look good. Now they're willing to listen to me. All right. Mr. Dames, they knew who I was in reality because they were the National Security Council. Captain Dames, why were the Sovs able to build a battlefield laser and we could not? And I had all great view graphs. I said, well, sir, it's because of this. It's because of dialectic materialism. Go on. Well, dialectic materialism does not, it is a different philosophy than what we grow up with. And it has that different philosophy extends into learning in colleges and universities. And that learning, that different type of learning eventuates in different technology. So for instance, they developed, klystron tubes and fast switching that we did not develop because we thought about the universe differently. And additionally, they are generalists where we're specialists. In the medical field, one doctor will recommend this and it will counter another drug, the patient is dead. If he were a generalist, he would know all about these kinds of things. And the Russians had to be able to use a limited amount of money to counter our Star Wars program, the Star Wars program, and Brilliant Pebbles with a lot less money. And they did it by using traditional means. And they snookered us by getting around the technology problem. But anyway, since their technology is different and they approach the problem of battlefield laser differently, and they design things that we would not ordinarily think about, and that's why they have the battlefield laser. Okay. That's what I had to put up with, those kinds of things, at the high levels of the government. All right, you guys, great to speak with you. I hope to meet you someday. And in terms of either Garricky, ordinarily, I wasn't so busy. I would prefer to go to Germany myself and work with the Polizei on the cases. A lot I could say about that. But what I wanted to finish up with, my idea of finding these missing kids in any state of being or non-being, going to be over and over again, is going to get attention. If I find just one, it's like, oh, even a broken clock is right twice a day, type of shit, you're going to get that. But two is different, especially if they're back to back. And I like to participate in the search itself rather than pass it off to somebody. Just like I'm out the door in a couple of minutes, I'm pro-Henson. I did the work. Now I want to finish it myself. I'll stand there with the remains, call the sheriff. The sheriff will come. This is who I am. This is what I did. And then do it again. Now nobody can say it's a stop clock type of thing. So that's my approach to getting the general public at street level to learn about remote viewing. What is this? It's used for that. Then, and they're certainly going to want to learn more about it. Yeah. So, good to see you again. Good. You look old. You look older.
That's life.
Uh, Germans, they're so stiff, kind of thing. You know, the train's got to be right on the side. And I bet in Germany, I would see a train come into a station and stop before the getting in the station because they're 30 seconds too early, and then they have to be exactly on time.
But it's 30 years ago. Now you are happy if the train arrives anytime at the same day.
Yeah,
Things have
Yeah.
changed a lot.
Yeah. I don't want to get into that. We'll leave on a happy note. No,
Okay.
you look great.
Thank you very much.
Okay, see you guys later.
Bye-bye. Have a good time, Ed, and thank you
Thank you.
all the guys here in the chat. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Gunther.
My pleasure. Hope to meet you soon.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.